So, morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time zone you may be. So, my name is Alex Michael, and I'm here to actually show us how to install GitLab on a server. So, first of all, we need to ask ourselves, what is GitLab? Some people say it's a virtual control system. Some people say it's a tool which is being used for auto deployment of applications, and I'll say it is both. So GitLab is very useful whenever you want to automate deployment of applications. It is also good for it's also good for helping you to store your application files. It's good for making deployment easy. So that's that about GitLab, and right about now we are to install a GitLab on a server. So from my screen over here, we have a server being provisioned on AWS EC2. So we have the server, and we are going to be putting our GitLab in this server. We named it GitLab server. So we will be SSHing into this server, and we'll be doing that by first going to connect and then going to SSH client, and then we copy this, come here, paste, enter. Let me increase this more. Yep. So I'll say yes. Yes. Okay, fine. So right about now we are in our server. So the next thing we have to do is that we have to start our installation. But first of all, we have to update our server using sudo apt updates. So that way we will be updating our server. And after that, we will go into installation proper of our GitLab server. So one of the things you must take note of is that you must have at least an 8 gig RAM. You know, when you are provisioning your EC2 server, make sure that you have at least 8 gig RAM. If you use the default 4 gig RAM, yes, it might work, but it might not work for long. You find out that your application will be broken, or installation will be slow and all that. So that is what we have to take note of. So the first thing we have to do is that after updating, we have to start installing our dependencies. And we do this first by installing postfix. So in order for us to do that, we run this command here, sudo apt install c8 certificate postfix and all that. Then internet site, I'll say okay, yes. Internet site, yes. I'll click on enter, then I'll click on enter, then it does that for me. So the next thing I have to do is that I have to install GitLab, and in installing GitLab, I have to run a particular command. First is to enter the TMP folder or directory. So that means I have to do a cdtmp, and I'll go on enter. So right now, as you can see, I am in my TMP directory. And the next thing I have to do is that I have to run a command. And this is the command called hello https and all that. Then I enter. So it has done what I want it to do. And then the next thing I have to do is that I have to run a sudo bash tmp So all this will actually be, it will be sent on my description. So you'll be able to get the the scripts I'm using currently, you know. So okay, yes, confirm, good, good, good. So Control C, right? Control C. Let me go down, down, down. So this is actually to just check what we have. So end, yes, end. Escape, Control C, Control Q. Okay, let me do Q. Okay. So sorry about that. So in case you get that error, the thing you have to do is that you have to use your Q. Just click on your Q to escape. So let me go back. Sorry about this. Taking back. Okay, fine. So the next thing we have to do is that we have to install GitLab using sudo apt install GitLab CE. So we'll be having that. First of all, let me clear this. Then we'll be doing this. This will start our installation. Yes, start our installation. And after that, the next thing we have to do is that we have to adjust firewall, you know, enable SSH, enable allow port 22 also in the server. So we'll be doing that right about now, and then, but first of all, we have to wait for this GitLab CE to be downloaded, or rather installed. So while we wait for that, we can talk about some other things. So you know, sometimes you find different collaborations, you know, in a project. You have one reason or the other to put 2, 3, 4, 5 developers to work on different modules in an application. So in order for there to be a collaboration, an agreement, or a concord between these developers, of course, they are working on one project, but yet they still need to bring their different ideas. They have to bring different things that they've worked on in that application, and they have to put it together to make sure that that application is working fine. So I, as let me just say, as developer A, I will be able to see what developer B has worked on, and developer B will be able to see what I, as developer C or D, has also worked on. So, you know, all these files has to be put in a centralized point, and that centralized point is GitLab. That is the way GitHub also works, and that is why we call them version control, because each of these scripts that we upload, each of these scripts that we say, okay, fine, let us push it to, let's just say GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. Each of them have a version. Though it might not be called version, like version, maybe version 1.0, version 3.8 and all that. However, we also have something called a commit shell. So this commit shell helps us to record it helps us to record each and every commit that we make. For instance, I, as developer C, make a change in a particular code. Now, how am I going to track that change? It is through its commit. And how am I able to also track that commit? It is through the commit shell. So it means that this commit shell, of course, it has a code that it uses. Alphanumeric, it can be A3ZE57868Z, it carries different characters together, and then it is unique to that particular commit. So whenever we call on that commit, or that commit shell rather, then it takes us straight into the commit or the change that we have made at that period of time. So that is how useful GitLab is. It works more like Git, but the thing is that it goes way beyond Git. It goes way beyond Git and GitHub. Why? Because GitLab helps us in automations. Though GitHub, quite all right, also helps in automations, but that of GitLab, it was created specifically for CI/CD, meaning that to details, it actually solves that problem of automating deployments. So some people may ask, okay, fine, what is the best thing we have to do? One of the best practices, or should I say, what are those best things, those best practices that we must put into consideration when we are working with GitLab? So one of those things you must put into consideration is this. Of course, you must have your unique username and password, and talking about username and password, it is not advisable to give to give any user root access. It is not advisable because this GitLab, as a centralized tool, as a tool which is used in automating different tasks, different scripts, different applications, you can't possibly give it to just everybody. So that is why it is very important that you, as maybe a developer or a DevOps engineer, or maybe a cloud engineer, and then you have to, create a GitLab server. You do not have to give anyone a root access, or else it might be difficult for you to start tracing where the problem is once in a while, of course, when code start breaking. And what if at the end of the day, the person or the user you are giving that root access to does not have as much competences in handling such tool? Then you find out that a whole lot of things goes wrong. So of course, do not give root access to any user. Do not give root access to any user. So that being said, another thing that you must also take into consideration is this. Though we have not started working on, let's just say, project yet, but GitLab being a tool which is being used for automation, GitLab being a tool used in solving deployment problems, having to carry out deployment of your applications, of your websites manually. Of course, it only means something that you are trying to automate that task. So it means that you can also do it manually. Now, this is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to automate a task. For me to automate a task, it means that there is a manual approach to carrying out that task. So, sometimes when you start working on your GitLab CI, or your GitLab configuration file, you have some challenges and you want to test. You don't want to just walk in the blues. You don't just want to start writing codes on the fly and yet you are not sure what you are writing. So one of the things you can do is that you have to work on your server, work on your server or your local machine. Whatever works in your local machine, just take it, replicate it to your GitLab, CI. Now, for some people, they might be like, okay, fine, we don't know what do you mean by a GitLab CI? I'm talking about the GitLab configuration file. So this GitLab configuration file, you can also ask, okay, fine, what is a GitLab configuration file? Now, a GitLab configuration file, what it does basically is this. It helps you to have a space, to have a room, to have a place where you can input all your configurations. For instance, you want your steps, maybe while creating that server, you want, maybe, for instance, you want to create a directory. After creating a directory, you want to post, maybe you want to pull an image, or you want to pull a script, and after pulling the script, then you want to install some dependencies, or you want to install some packages, like what I'm doing currently right now. I can actually use a GitLab CI to do it. All these scripts I'm writing, all these syntaxes I'm writing in order to install GitLab, I can actually do them on a configuration file. That is why it is called a configuration file. As we all know, to configure means to set. So, as I was saying earlier, for you to, maybe you are having a problem or you're having a challenge having to automate a particular task, and you are like, okay, fine, I don't know what to do anymore. It's not working, it's not working. What you should just do is this: spin up a server, and then whatever you think you are confused about when writing your configuration in your configuration file, replicate it on your server. And then when you do that, if it works fine, then it means you have to include it into your configuration file or your CI. And if it doesn't work, so what that means is that you have to keep trying different syntaxes and different ways for you to make sure that that particular line of code works, or that particular task is fine, before you can then transfer whatever code you've written on your server to your GitLab CI or your GitLab configuration file. So you might ask, okay, fine. For GitLab configuration file, what do I'm talking about configuration file. What kind of language are you using to writing this configuration file? You might ask yourself. So I'm actually taking out this time to explain these things while our GitLab is installing. Actually, GitLab is quite heavy. So it takes a whole lot of time, I think some couple of minutes before it works. So these are the things that I'm talking about. So you have to make sure you have your configuration file being fixed. So how do you actually do it? I was talking about languages. The kind of language you write is we actually use a YAML language. The YAML helps us to write our configuration. So that's what we are trying to just say. And that is why, if you should go, maybe after installing your GitLab, when you want to create a configuration file, it asks you, or it tells you, GitLab, I think GitLab -ci dot, it must end with a YAML, meaning it's a YAML file. And any YAML file you find, know that it's a configuration file. Wherever you might find YAML, YAML is a configuration file. It tries to, configure servers. It tries to configure packages. It even tries to help the server to also communicate with third-party applications or third-party server. So right about now, I will be stopping this video, waiting for our GitLab to be installed. And right about then, we can continue. So that's where we'll be stopping for now.